Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hello, friends.
Hello.
Hey.
As always, I am joined by my super spectacular co-host, Kate Sittars. Hello, Kate.
Hello, hello.
Hello. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by copywriter extraordinaire, CCA student, agency owner, John Godfrey. Hey, John.
Hey.
Hello.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me.
We are very excited to have you
Overdue.
here. Yes, overdue. We have had the pleasure of working with John, certainly in the CCA, but also in our CCA Next Level program. So it has been a pleasure to work with you. And now it's, as Kate said, overdue time to share your story.
Thank you.
So speaking of your story, let's go back to the beginning, maybe not birth, but at some point, as you started to move into your, what is your career background? And then how did that translate into later
Yeah,
copywriting?
you have a fascinating background. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I wasn't sure if you wanted to hear the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, actually, I wanted to start out just by saying thank you to you two, because
Thank you.
you do appear in this story at an important juncture. It meant a lot to me. So I wanted to have that opportunity to say, the course meant a lot to me, and it kind of steered my future to my present. So the long story is that right after college, I moved to Japan and I became a Buddhist monk. And I spent my 20s until 33. I think I was a monk until 33. So that's, in a way, that is kind of the start of the copyright journey, because I got back to the US, and as great as being a monk is, it's not a job in America. And so I needed to figure out how to do job stuff. And I'd never done that. I'd never had a job as an adult. And it was a very odd situation to find myself in as an adult. I did a bunch of things. I ended up going back to school and becoming a middle school teacher. So that was after a little bit of trial and error with some different things. That's what I settled on. And I did that for about 7 years. It was great in certain ways, but it's a hard time to be a teacher. I mean, I think a lot of your students are teachers, honestly. And that's probably why a lot of people are looking for other careers, because it's a really hard time to be a teacher. And I just found it incredibly stressful. And after 7 years, I got to this point where I kept thinking it was going to get better, and it just didn't. And I was just kind of at the end of my rope, and I needed to rethink, what I was doing. And so at that time, I was using this book with my students for their career search called Designing Your Life. Maybe you know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, that was great. And I was teaching it with students. They really got a lot out of it, and I saw that they were really developing. And so I kind of just turned that back on myself, and I was like, maybe this is what I need, to really just think about what is it that I like doing and what is it that I enjoy about. I mean, teaching taught me a lot about what I don't like and what bothers me. I wasn't able to go out during the day. This came up in a next level conversation, that it's like, there's all these businesses that open at 9 a.m. and then they close at 5.
Yeah.
And every time like a cool one would open that I wanted to visit, I'd be like, I am never, ever going to get a chance to go. And it was just so sad, to know that like these places were opening and closing and I was never going to see them. And even if they opened at nighttime, I couldn't really go at night either, because I had to go to bed early so I could wake up early. And it was just it was a tough situation anyways. And I was just kind of realizing that. So I just started that process of, what they say, it's like a 4-point process, like get curious about what your interests are, talk to people that are doing it or are interested in doing it, and try stuff, just like set the bar low and clear it often. So that's what I was doing. And, I'd always considered myself a writer, but since, when I was in high school, I was, writing zines, and that was just always kind of part of until I went to the monastery, that was a big part of my life. And I had to kind of put all that creative stuff away. And I'd sealed it up pretty good. Like it was hard to get out. And so I ran into this guy somehow in a coffee shop, and it came out that he was a content writer, and he wrote like science articles and this sort of thing. So I kind of nailed him down. I was like, okay, we got to talk. And I had one of these conversations with him to kind of figure out what it was like. And in the course of the conversation, he said something along the lines like, I was like, okay, well, do you make a living doing this? He's like, yeah, it's okay. It's like, I mean, if I was writing, ads or something like that, there's tons of money writing ads, but you got to write ads. And it was just this throwaway statement. I was kind of like, huh, all right, okay, interesting. Like, because I mean, science is interesting, but I don't really care that much about it. Why? Let's think about this whole ads thing. Maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. So, I started looking into it, and pretty quickly, I feel like the algorithm found me. Your Facebook ad found me, and like sometimes it works, or it used to work.
Yeah.
And so that was just kind of floating in the transom for a little while, and I like kept reading through it and thinking about it. And that one, that was I can't even remember how much it cost, but at the time it felt like a lot. At this point, since going solo, like I've spent so much money on coaching, like different times that like, I can't believe that I really thought that hard about it. But at the time it was a big deal. Um, but I pulled the trigger and I did it. And I started talking to people about the possibility of being a copywriter and what they know about it and freelancing. I started talking to other freelancers. And one of the freelancers that I talked to was a friend of mine, and he was a web designer. And he's like, you know what? Like, I'm trying to build out my business into an agency. Why don't I hire you and you can be my first employee, and we'll do that way, and we'll just see how it goes. So that was kind of the like safety net I needed to finally quit teaching, which was really, really hard. That was really, really hard to come to that decision. Uh it's teaching feels so safe in a way, like it's a steady paycheck, you kind of know where you're going to be, and it's hard. I mean, I would spend my entire summer vacation having anxiety for the next first day of school. So it wasn't like a lot of freedom, but it felt like if I wanted to be a teacher forever, I kind of could be. And so it was really hard to kind of jump away from that safety net and try something else. But that was enough that I could kind of take that next step. And so I joined his agency. And then this kind of happened a couple of times in the journey, but I started doing something that felt safe, and then it immediately went away. And I just kind of got tossed out in the like out of the frying pan and into the fire kind of situation. So I was working at his agency for a couple of months, and then he just decided he hated he didn't want to be an agency. He really wanted to go back to freelancing, which I get. Like it really does change the dynamic to all of a sudden be a boss, rather than just being, as I'm sure it's different. So no shade on him whatsoever. And honestly, that was really good for me, because I was really scared of taking the next step of going freelance on my own. So that gave me the opportunity to kind of get started. But it also set me on a little bit of a side mission, because he kind of kicked me out the door, and he's like, but I have this client, they'd be a great fit for you, build a website for them. And so I started getting fed web design clients, and I was not a web designer, so it was like both. I had to learn how to freelance, and I had to learn how to design websites all at once. And I did, but talk about imposter syndrome. Like I was literally an imposter, like kind of going to people that were looking for web design and being like, yes, I can do this for you. And I did. It's just like a whole lot of researching while you're doing it. And, like a lot of time that I didn't charge for, just working really hard, and then giving them, a product that now I could put out in a couple of days if I wanted to. But at the time it really took a lot.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the start. I can't remember what the question was. What was it?
That was your story.
You
So
nailed
was that
it.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and I think this probably resonates with a lot of people of teaching being feeling safe, and like that you thought you could do it forever, and if you wanted to, you could do it forever. But as
Right.
you said that, I was like, you could still go back to it if you really wanted to. I think sometimes we forget that it
Right.
feels
Yeah.
like a big leap, but you can always go back.
Mhm.
Except for in this situation. And I mean, but to your point that it feels safe, the last school that I was at closed within the year of my leaving. So it's actually
Wow.
gone,
Wow.
So, I mean,
Wow.
it's just like, had I not done that,
Yeah.
I would have had to do something else anyways,
Sure.
And that's happened a couple of times where I was in this situation where there was a safe choice, and then there was the risky one that I took, and I took the risky one, and then the safe choice exploded. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't really there. So yeah,
Yeah, it's an
it's
illusion. Yeah.
it is yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a sense for why it felt so particularly uncomfortable to go freelance? That you knew that you were prepping for it, but now in retrospect, you can say, I wouldn't have actually done it unless I had to.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't think that this is universal, but I'm understanding this about myself a lot lately. I have a kind of catastrophist mindset, more or less innately, and that's something that the more I work with, and the more I understand that that's not reality. Like my mom was like this. Most of my family's like this, but it's just like, maybe you want to put some wood in the car in case you break down in the middle of the night and there's you need to start a fire, like that kind of thinking. And so my mind definitely tends to go to the worst possible outcome first and spend a lot of time avoiding that rather than going to the thing that I want. Um,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and even to the point that I don't recognize it when I've got there, like to the place. So like even when I've sort of arrived at the goal, I can't recognize it because I wasn't looking for it. I
Hmm.
was looking for the catastrophe and I can still kind of see it out of the corner of my eye. But I think it's a mindset thing.
That's
Just
interesting.
self-awareness
Yeah.
though,
Yeah.
to know that I think that's the first step, so good for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I spend a lot of time. I mean, Buddhist
I
monk.
think it's
That
Yeah.
relatable though.
Really.
I do think that
yeah.
there's other folks listening to this that will definitely, so thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I think the imposter stuff, the catastrophist thinking, that has been the I think the biggest challenge, really, more than anything else. Like, I mean, because in the end, it's like you lay out the steps to take. There's steps that you take, and you just take them, and you just do it one day after another, and things just gradually get better.
Hmm.
I mean, it has been my experience
Hmm.
generally.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's like you need a plan. I think it is good to have a plan, but at the same time, the plan's definitely not going to happen. Something else is going to happen, but the other
Yeah.
thing that's going to happen is most likely going to be okay. I
Yeah.
guess
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
where I'd been falling. Yeah.
Well, and it's you have recognized in yourself that you kind of take it to a higher degree, or not. You don't take it; it gets taken to a higher degree in your mind.
Mm,
But I absolutely think that for most people, if not everyone, the
mm,
the biggest thing that keeps them from taking action, from doing the things that they need to do, and even the things that they want to do, is is what's going on in their minds, in our minds. I shouldn't say as if I'm not a part of that. I have not graduated beyond being
right.
human.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's that element of no matter where you are heading, there's always that part of your brain that's going to kick up and go, "Oh, I don't know if that's a good idea. No, oh,
Right.
I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do that." And it's hard to overcome that when it's in your own head. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard a phrase that really helped me recently. It was somebody saying, on average, things are going to turn out average. And it was like, oh, that has been true this entire time. All the time that ever I'm waiting for, like, that every next day to be the last day. Like, and something crazy is going to happen that I'm going to have to do something drastic in order to fix it. Like, I'm expecting that, or I have been, until pretty recently,
Yep.
like every day. And what has actually happened every day is that every next day is more or less like the day before it, and that just has been continuing. I will say my average has gotten a lot better though. Like, the average day 5 years ago when I was a teacher was just not as good as my average day is now. And so that has slowly changed over time. I think, by making a lot of positive choices that align with my thinking and who I want to be and how I want to be in the world. But uh but it wasn't an immediate, like, rocket taking off and now everything's great. And I think the on average, things are going to be average statement also lets me sort of release the expectation that if things aren't like a rocket taking off at any given moment, that I must be in a rocket exploding. Like, those are the only two options,
Right.
and that, like, actually it's more like, kind of a staircase just gradually going up. And that's more realistic.
Hmm.
Mm,
Absolutely. Well, and I think
Love that.
too that the we like the idea of that immediate success, that
mm,
overnight immediate success. But can you imagine what a shock that would be to our systems?
Right. Yeah.
If
Mhm.
you go from, I've got nothing to now you've got 10 clients and they all want to work with you immediately. And
Yeah.
then now you're working with Google and you're working with Apple. And like
It's
the
too much.
gradual, exactly. I think that the gradual is probably what's best for us anyway. Yeah.
Right. 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 Right.
And so what does your life look like now? What is the structure of the work that you do, of your agency? What kind
Mhm.
of what's the life you're leading now?
Well, thank you for asking. Well, I think the first thing that I want to say is that the main way my average has gotten better, well, two ways, right? One is just the quality of my day, the things kind of out a little bit outside of work, but that include work. Like I can work from a coffee shop, not every day. It's like, I mean, it has to be a lighter day to do that. So it's not like the typing on the beach dream or whatever. I've never typed on a beach. I've never brought a computer to a beach.
Sand gets them the keys.
It's
It's a
Yeah,
terrible
I don't
idea.
recommend it.
it's I know, it's just like there's if you
Like just be on the
if you
beach.
problem solve it for even a couple of seconds, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that probably is not going to happen. But I can go to the beach sometimes, you know. Um, but that's a big deal. Like I can go to coffee shops and I can talk to people and I can be out during the day, which was not a reality for me before.
You can go to
Um,
those 9 to 5 shops
I
finally.
can go at so many 9 to 5 shops. I just like spend so much time in 9 to 5 shops. Um, and that was the goal, you know, like, I mean,
Yeah.
those things that matters to me. And,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not like I shop for records or whatever. I don't know, but like, yeah, it's, um, those sorts of things. I can take time off whenever I want without having to worry that somebody's going to be mad at me. You know, I spend more time with my cats and like just those sorts of things that aren't really included in the job, but are definite lifestyle improvements. Like that's number one. I want to say that's improved. The second thing is the amount of creative time that I have. So I get to be creative at work. And it is, you know, like it's like to kind of go back to the story with the science writer that I talked to earlier, you know, there was like, well, you know, if you wrote ads or whatever, and was kind of like putting it down in a way. It's like, who wants to do that? It's like horribly boring. It's going to be the worst, but you'll get paid really well or whatever. Um, and you know, among writers, like I have noticed that kind of like I don't want to say disdain so much, but I want to say it's not true. You know, like I find this really interesting. It's really like what I get to do with clients is really fascinating. Like I especially because I write a lot of websites, so I'm talking to a lot of solopreneurs, especially. But even when people are working in organizations, I get to hear about their life story and I get to hear about their day to day and like what's important to them and why it matters and why they think this organization matters. And that's all interesting stuff. Like that's things that they don't know how to say themselves and they need somebody to help them bring it out. And in a way, it's like they don't know how to see themselves in like as valuable or like worthy of note, you know? And like being able to shine that light at people is really cool. That
Mhm.
like I and it's that's so I don't know. I mean, if there was like a sense, you know, that I had before getting into it, that this is gonna be like, I'm gonna be stuck in an office somewhere wearing a tie, writing stupid crap on the back of a cereal box. It's like that has not happened yet. And it's really enjoyable. And, you know, like the dream of being able to make a living being a writer, like that in itself is just that's pretty amazing, you know. So that's number two. Um okay, third thing, the nitty-gritty of my business. So we, like I said, we started out as I started out as a web design person, you know. Um and I was building on Squarespace, occasionally WordPress. Well, take it back a little bit. We had so that when I got let go from the first agency that had hired me, I didn't bring it in because it's a little bit melodramatic, but my partner had also lost her job that same weekend. Like we lost 100% of our income in the same week. We were sitting outside in a hammock and I was like trying to think of like what I'm going to do next. And then she like she got a phone call and it was her boss saying that they're downsizing and she got laid off. Like, and we're both kind of just sitting there in the yard, like, what are we gonna do? You know? So she was kind of scrambling around odd jobs for a while. And since I had more work than her, she was helping me out in odd moments. And she really has a skill for web design. Like she has a natural kind of visual, you know, take on the world. And it was sort of embarrassing because she got better than me pretty fast. And so over the next couple of years, like I kind of trained her on everything that I knew with web design and slowly started handing over the web design part. to her. And now it's pretty much, she handles pretty much 100% of the web design. And that frees me up to focus on copy. Up to this point, I think most of the copy that I've been doing, it's doing websites for folks, like kind of like part of, we design websites and we write them, or sometimes people would come to us and they don't really need a redesign. They just need a rewrite, or maybe they don't need a rewrite. They just need a redesign. We just kind of split it up that way. And then there's like all the sort of ancillary services that they need, like email funnels and, this and that I just do for them. And now we're kind of, so now that we're kind of fully split. So we have this web design, business that's sort of on its own. And I'm focusing on the copy and building that.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Thanks.
Wow. Yeah. I think that the evolution worked out very nicely in spite of the kind of dynamite to TNT explosion beginning.
Yeah.
That worked out very nicely. Yeah.
There's a lot of dynamite in the story. Yeah. Or maybe I just see things as dynamite. I get really surprised by things.
I will say earlier in this, I think you said, and I think it was in relation to being forced to go freelance, that it was an opportunity. So I want to kudos to, I meant to call that out earlier, because I do think it's smart to look at it as an opportunity, because it was. I think in the moment it can be maybe hard to see it as such, of like, great, I got laid off.
Yeah.
Cool, this is an opportunity to do that thing that I've always wanted to do, and now I'm forced to do it, sure, but
right.
Nonetheless.
Yeah, no, super scary, but I just didn't, I don't know if I didn't have it in me or if I just didn't have
you did have it in you.
I guess I did. Right. Yeah.
You made it work. You could have gone somewhere else, and you could have gone
back to teaching.
Exactly.
Right.
Somewhere, not at that school, but certainly somewhere else. You did it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for managing to kind of like steer the ship back to what I wanted to do in the first place, which is I didn't want to be a web designer. I wanted to be a writer. And I got back to doing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's paid off for you. You are making a great income. I mean, you don't have to share numbers if you don't want to. But you're surpassing what you would have made as a teacher.
Yeah. It took, I don't think the first year I quite made it, but the second year, and pretty much since then it's been better than teaching, which was a surprise, like not what I would have. Well, I don't know. I mean, I left room, like it's when I went to be a teacher, I went $40,000 in debt to be a teacher, and had a year that I couldn't work at all because I was in school full time, like basically double time, and and that's kind of normal for a career change, So I feel like it's important to give oneself the grace of having a period where you're getting into it, and it's like going back to school, because it's a craft, there's a lot to learn, you're never done.
I think giving yourself grace, I think in a lot of these situations is huge and often hard to do for us. But are there any other, I think that's a great advice to people making any sort of career change, but do you have other advice that you would give to people? Because I feel like, both from transitioning from monk to teacher is a huge change, and then teacher to copywriter. So through those processes, was there anything else that any other advice that you'd give to folks doing that?
Tons, kind of too much. Let me think. Can you just like clarify a little bit, like in what situation, and I can narrow down the things that I would say?
Sure. I think, and maybe you've seen this in the group too, but I think a lot of people want to make these transitions, and they have the same kind of thoughts maybe as you do, of like this is a big thing. Am I capable of this? The imposter syndrome, all of that. And as adults, making changes can be certainly hard, and learning something new. So I guess in terms of, it feels like a big thing. It is,
Right,
how to kind of approach that. I don't want to lead you with advice.
No. Yeah.
Step by step, but duh.
Right. Yeah. No, I got tons, because I had a really hard time with it. Just say from the get-go. So I had to really, really work on it. I think the first thing that I want to say is you got to train your brain, to think differently. Like if your brain is kind of set towards seeing the worst possible scenario, which, I feel like some people have an easier time. I certainly don't uh, really had to work on it. And I mean, there was a moment, I think it was just about a year ago, where partner and I had just like happened upon this manifestation exercise that, um, and I'm not like a real big manifester, per se, but I do spend a lot of time meditating and like, and things like that. But for when this just kind of got my attention, it's like, okay, all right, let's just try. Um, and it was, 3 times in the morning, 6 times in the afternoon, 9 times at night, write down what you want your life to look like, and so then that's it's a big time commitment, so, but we were like, all right, let's freaking do. And so we did that. I think the things that it's like, we wanted to buy a house. I wanted, like, creatively, I wanted to be in a band, do
Fun.
music again, which I hadn't done for a long, long time. I wanted to make like $90,000 a year. That was the goal,
Oh yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, which at the time it felt real. It was like, it just felt ridiculous, like there's no way that I can ever do this. Like, why am I even trying, And it was, I want to say a month or like 2 months, like the next month we had like a 20K month, like, I mean, like things got really good really fast. We bought a house the next month. Like, uh, and I called up, like, I called up my high school friends and I was like, do you guys want to play music again? And they're like, oh, okay. And they live in like Georgia and Pittsburgh, but like, we were like, all right, let's do it. And so we wrote an album, we toured,
Oh my God, you're like the postal service, but like,
we did, yeah,
Fun.
we did the whole thing. And so, I'm playing music again. I'm like playing another show like 2 weekends from now. But it's like
oh
part of my life now,
yeah,
whereas like literally a year ago, it was zero part of my net. And now it's a big part of my life. And I live in this house, which I didn't used to live in, and
good for
I mean,
you.
just, it was, I think at the time, like it felt like a ridiculous, all those things felt like ridiculous asks. And I felt like this is so obviously going to fail. And I am going to feel so disappointed when it fails. I just feel silly even bothering to ask. And all of them were so close. Like, it was like, it was right there. It was just going to happen. Like, I don't even want to say necessarily as like a result of doing manifestation, but it was just like I was able to
Yeah.
see where I was, because I was looking at a false reality,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I was just thinking too, I can imagine people being like, wait, how many times do I have to write it down in the morning? And how many
right.
times do they have to, to
Yeah.
me, and I
Yeah.
think you'd agree with me, John, that
Yeah.
it wasn't the magical writing stuff down.
Right. Right.
It
Right.
was
Right.
you
Yeah.
actually identifying what mattered and how you were going
Hmm.
to stretch yourself. I mean, to go from, I'll never make $90,000 in a year to making $20,000 months is a huge, huge success, a huge win, no matter how you look at it. Yes, monetarily it's a huge win, but also for your mindset and for your sense of self as a professional and your worthiness as a professional. I'm sure that must have really shifted how you viewed yourself.
It was big. I mean, I still kind of struggle with it, but I also work on it more consistently because I recognize it,
Mhm.
um, and just being able to kind of have gratitude for what is, like I said, like, I mean, I have a lot of free time. I get to do way more of the things that I want. I see myself as a creative, which I didn't before, like that was just totally locked away. And now that is clearly a part of my life. Like, it's almost the first thing that I would say to somebody when I'm introducing myself.
Yeah.
Well, I think you mentioned the locked away. It gives me this idea too of even what you were just saying of these things that you wanted to achieve,
Mhm.
of just like unlocking and admitting that these were things that you wanted and being okay with that. Cause I think sometimes so
Yeah.
many of us are
Mhm.
afraid to even say, I want to make a 90,000. Like that feels like, do I even want
Yeah.
to? And the band even being like, oh, this is silly. I want to start. But the good for you for reaching out to your friends and being like, what's the worst that can happen? Right. And,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I, all it took was that reaching out and look at you now. So I just think that's cool. I think it's cool to and helpful to like,
Mm.
what do I want? And can I admit that to myself and potentially other people in my life
Right.
and look at what's possible when you actually, I think when you keep the lock, I think is such a good visual image. If you keep it locked away, then it's not never
Right.
going to be able to come out and be a thing.
Mhm. Or assuming that something's impossible without checking,
Yeah.
without kind of like looking into it and trying to find out. And that kind of goes back to the life design thing too. When you see somebody that's doing something that you find interesting, even if you feel like it's impossible that you could ever do it, it's like this person has some kind of special story that makes it impossible for
Mm.
them, but it's impossible for me. it's worth asking and kind of finding out how they got into it and what do they do and what is it like. And in that process of asking people about it and trying little things, before you know it, you're actually doing it, you know? I mean, which is sort of also part of the, like, the imposter syndrome process. Cause when you start out, you are an imposter. Like, you are not what the thing that you're trying to do. And I think, but in the process of trying little bits of it and doing this and that, you start to become it, but your mind still thinks you're an imposter because
Mhm.
you're still stuck on the old version of you. And so you have to do a little bit of work on recognizing that that's changed and that that's not your truth anymore and that you're living a different life.
Mhm. Well, I love
I
that
love all that.
what's part of that, the design your life process and what you did following that process is the element of trying. Because I think that so many people think, oh, I have to figure out what my next step is going to be
Right.
and have
Yeah.
to figure it out first.
Yeah.
And then I have to, and then what if I get into it and I don't like it? But
Mhm.
the being willing to just to dip your toes in whatever way you can. If it's copywriting, maybe maybe it's listening to the podcast, maybe it's even looking at ads and thinking, huh, how would I write that if I were doing that differently? But
Yeah.
the or no matter what the career is, there are opportunities to try it out and get a feel for it. It doesn't have to be, well, this is, I'm
Yeah.
jumping right in. I think that trying is so important, and so many people forget that that's an option.
Mhm.
We don't have to know everything before we do it. In fact, we almost never can know anything before we do it.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, it doesn't work. Like I had a really, really good plan to quit teaching. I had it all laid out. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I don't think a single part of it happened. Like, not like nothing, but it worked. In the end, it did kind of work. And it's like, you just got to build the plane as you're going. There's just
Mhm.
no other way to do it because humans are humans and life is life. And there's way too many variables to know
Yeah.
that far ahead.
mhm,
You
mhm.
know? Yeah, so, like, waiting until you understand the situation perfectly so that you can make a perfect plan, it's kind of a waste of time,
Yeah,
because you start on day 1 and your carefully built plan is already kinda out the window.
Yeah.
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 I love it. So
Mhm,
good.
mhm. I guess so. Then we you covered a lot, and you've given a lot of great advice. This the only maybe last piece of advice we'd ask for you, if someone is listening to this and they are in that place of ooh, I'm kind of interested in copywriting. I kind of think this is
Mhm,
something I want to do.
mhm.
What advice, if someone came up to you and said, "Oh," if someone came up to you in a coffee shop and said, "Oh, what kind of writing do you do?"
Oh,
Wow.
ads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
no.
Right, right, yeah, it's super boring. I'm
No.
in an
It's,
office
Right.
wearing a
it's
tie all day.
what would you say to them if someone said, "Hey, I'm interested in this. Is this something I should try?"
Right, right. Well, I mean, the first thing, which I have done when people do that, is I tell them to take the course. So that's
Thank
that
you.
Thanks.
that is
We
step. I
appreciate
mean,
that.
honestly, that is step one. I think that was a big part of my, and everybody that I've advised to take it was really happy they did, and none of them freelanced, but they all found jobs really quickly in
Nice.
in a
Cool.
field that they liked. So it was a different path for me, but it worked for them to do what
Yeah.
they wanted to do. So
Mhm.
that's been pretty cool. Other than that, again, I would say whatever there's anything that you want to do, just start asking anybody that is even
Mhm.
sort of kind of related to it. Like, just start taking steps in that direction and see what happens. So, like, if it's maybe they're not a writer, but maybe they're a freelancer, or maybe they know somebody, maybe they work at an ad agency or whatever it is. But, like, if they have something to do with something that you're kind of interested, ask them about how they got there. And people like to talk about themselves, if they know that you're not trying to get anything out of it, they just want, buy them a cup of coffee, like, keep it short, but, like, how did you get there? What are you doing? What would you say, to somebody like me that's trying something out, and just keep taking little steps in that direction. It's like, set the bar low and clear it, you know?
Yeah.
So one little step at a time, and kind of before you know it, you're sort of up to your waist in it, without having really taken it. At times, there's the big step moment of, I got to quit my job or whatever, but it makes it easier to just get as close to the edge as you can before you're taking that big step.
Mhm. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
Yeah, John, this has been wonderful. Now, if someone is listening and they're like, "Oh, I really like the way he thinks. I would like him to help me out with my copy."
Yeah.
How can people find you?
Yeah. So I have two websites. There's wonderwebcreative.com. And the new one is wonderwebcopy.com. So they can find me there.
But John, this has been so, so helpful. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciated the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure is ours. And with that, we will catch you all in the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Like what you heard? Hit subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're ready to take the first step toward becoming a copywriter yourself, sign up for a free video training right here.